I didn't remember how I got there. One moment, I was standing. The next, I was falling. There was no warning, no misstep, no ledge, just the sudden, violent absence of ground beneath my feet. My stomach turned inside out. The wind screamed past my ears, though I couldn't feel air. Just pressure, weightlessness, and yet an unbearable gravity pulling me down. My arms flailed, reaching for anything. Walls, sky, memory. But there was nothing. Just dark. Not black. Not void. Something deeper. Like falling through a thought that didn't want to be remembered. Then I hit something. Not hard. More like I landed inside myself. I opened my eyes. I was lying in a bed. Soft sheets. Faint light from a window. The hum of a fan overhead. My room. My things. Everything exactly where it should be. But I knew. This wasn't waking up. This was just another floor of the dream. I sat up slowly, every muscle tense. I scanned the room. The details were perfect. Too perfect. The poster on the wall had the same crease in the corner. My slippers were angled the way I always left them. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I reached for it, but the screen was blank. Just a soft glow. No time, no text. Just light. That's when I heard the whisper. Not outside, not inside. From under the bed, I froze. The whisper was rhythmic, not language, breathing, but wrong, like someone trying to imitate breath without understanding what lungs are. I leaned over slowly, heart pounding, and lifted the edge of the blanket. Darkness, too deep for the size of the bed. It looked like the floor was gone, like I was hovering over another abyss. And then I fell again, straight down, through the mattress, through the room, through the floor. No sound, no resistance, just the drop. I tumbled through shadow, and then landed hard, gasping, on cold tiles. I was in a hallway now. Long, narrow, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering in erratic rhythms. The walls were tiled like a hospital, but stained. The air smelled like mildew and copper. I stood slowly. My hands shook. My feet were bare. The floor was wet. At the end of the hall, a door creaked open. I didn't want to walk toward it, but my body did. Every step echoed unnaturally, like sound had too much space to move in. When I reached the door, I looked back. There was no hallway anymore, just a wall. I pushed the door open. Inside was a stairwell, spiraling downward. Of course. Down again. I began to descend. Each step groaned underfoot. My breath grew shorter, not from exertion, like the air was thinning. The walls closed tighter the further I went, until I had to hunch, then crawl. I came out the other side into a massive cavern. It looked like a cathedral made of bone and cloth. The ceiling pulsed like a lung. In the center stood a table. On the table, my body, sleeping, chest rising and falling, wires in my skin, ink dripping from my mouth onto the floor, spelling out something I couldn't read. I stepped closer. My own face twitched. My eyes fluttered. And then they opened. The version of me on the table stared directly at me and whispered, "You're not done falling yet." The floor cracked. I tried to run, but there was no edge. The whole world gave way, and I fell again. This time I screamed, not in fear, in recognition. Because I realized, every time I fall, I land in a place more like myself, and I didn't know how many layers were left. The fall slowed before it stopped, not with impact, but with quiet. The sensation of falling faded until I was drifting, not upward or downward, just suspended in a place where direction had stopped mattering. The moment I realized this, I found myself lying on the floor of a room I'd never seen before, lit by a pale blue glow that didn't come from lamps or windows. The walls were smooth concrete, seamless, and slightly damp, like the inside of an unfinished basement. But there was no ceiling. Above me stretched a black void, a space so high and endless I couldn't tell where it stopped, if it stopped at all. The longer I stared into it, the more it began to feel like it was staring back. I stood slowly, legs unsteady, the memory of the previous fall still coiled in my chest like a held breath. The room was empty except for a single desk placed in the middle, and on it a mirror about the size of a book. I approached it, not because I wanted to, but because the room offered nothing else. I picked up the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, perfectly normal, too normal. I blinked, and my reflection didn't. I tilted my head, and it didn't follow. It simply stared. The longer I looked, the more wrong it became. Eyes slightly wider than they should be, mouth too still, skin too smooth. I wanted to put the mirror down, but my hands wouldn't move. The reflection finally spoke. It didn't open its mouth. The words were in my head, quiet but sharp. "You think you're escaping?" it said. "You think every fall leads somewhere new. But this is all the same place. It's only changing shape because you refuse to admit where you are." I wanted to ask where that was, but I knew the answer would be worse than silence. I forced myself to drop the mirror. It didn't break. It just melted into the surface of the desk like mercury sinking into water. The light in the room dimmed, not all at once, but in slow pulses, like a dying signal. That's when the walls began to stretch. Not physically, not outward, but conceptually. The space bent without moving, like the dimensions of the room were unraveling. I backed away from the desk and pressed against the wall. But the wall was breathing again, slow and steady, warm against my back like a sleeping animal. Something whispered behind it. Not words this time, just sound. Wet, rhythmic, instinctive. Then I noticed the floor wasn't solid anymore. It rippled beneath my feet, thin and gelatinous. My footsteps didn't echo. They sank. The middle of the room opened downward into a dark spiral. Not a hole, but a memory shaped like a staircase. I didn't want to walk toward it, but standing still was worse. The ceilingless room was shrinking, not in size, but in possibility. Every moment I stayed, the light faded further, and the shape of my own body began to blur at the edges. I looked at my hands and saw static where my fingers should have been. I stepped into the spiral. The descent was quiet. The walls were covered in tiny moving symbols that vanished when I focused on them. My reflection appeared again in the stone, but distorted now, taller, with eyes that moved before my head did, mouth smiling at things I hadn't thought yet. It wasn't just following me. It was going ahead of me, leading me deeper. At the bottom of the spiral, the tunnel opened into a vast hallway filled with doors. Hundreds of them, floor to ceiling. Each one looked different, some ancient, some modern, some cracked open just enough to let sound escape. I heard laughter behind one, weeping behind another, a scraping sound behind several. One door pulsed faintly. I opened it. Inside was a version of my bedroom, just like the one I'd woken up in before, but slightly off. The poster was upside down. The sheets were on the floor. The fan above spun in the wrong direction. I stepped inside. On the bed was someone sleeping. Me again, just like before. Only this time, when I approached, he opened his eyes and smiled. "You've been here longer than you remember," he said, and reached out to grab my wrist. I tried to pull away, but the moment our skin touched, the bed collapsed into a pit, and we both fell again, spiraling downward into another drop, another layer, another chance to remember or forget. And as I fell, I realized I no longer knew if I was the one falling or the one waiting at the bottom. When I hit the ground this time, There was no pain, only the subtle dread of recognition. I landed on soft carpet, thick with dust and footprints I couldn't remember leaving. I stood in the middle of a long hallway, lined with doors on both sides, each identical, plain white with brass knobs and no markings, but I knew instinctively that none of them led out. The hallway was lit by flickering sconces that cast the kind of shadows that moved even when nothing else did. I reached for the nearest doorknob and paused, not because I was afraid of what was inside, but because I suspected it wouldn't remember me. I opened it anyway. Inside was a classroom. Desks were arranged in perfect rows. Chalk dust hung in the air like mist, and at the front of the room stood a blackboard filled with scribbles I couldn't read. I took a step in and saw someone sitting in the far corner, facing the wall. I didn't call out. I just watched. The figure was blurry, unfocused, as if it was being censored by the dream itself, but I could hear it whispering something, a repetition, a mantra. I leaned closer, trying to make out the words, and then I heard it clearly, my name, repeated over and over again, spoken not with urgency or affection, but like a ritual. I backed out of the room and closed the door. The next door opened into a living room filled with people I didn't know, all of them wearing masks with smiling faces. They didn't speak. They didn't look at me. They sat frozen in mid-motion, one pouring tea that never spilled, another lifting a glass that never reached their lips. A man on the couch turned his head slowly as I entered. His mask had no eyes. He raised a finger to his lips, and though I didn't hear anything, I understood. I wasn't supposed to be here yet. I stepped out and shut the door behind me. Door after door, room after room, none of them held a version of me I recognized. One was a hospital room, with machines that beeped to no rhythm. The bed empty, but the sheets rumpled, as if someone had just left. Another showed a bathroom mirror cracked down the center, and in the reflection, I was brushing my teeth with ink instead of toothpaste. The more I wandered, the more the hallway itself began to forget me. The walls grew smoother, featureless. The lights dimmed. The air lost its texture. My footsteps didn't echo anymore. I looked behind me once and saw the hallway closing itself up, doors vanishing, floor shrinking. I was being erased. I ran. The hallway seemed endless, but eventually, one door pulsed faintly, with red light beneath it, different from the rest. I didn't hesitate this time. I threw it open and found a narrow staircase descending into darkness, the edges of the steps painted with a faint glow, like someone had highlighted them just for me. I descended quickly, afraid that if I slowed down, I'd vanish completely. At the bottom was a single room, bare, gray walls, no windows, no furniture, except for a mirror, not a small one, floor to ceiling, and in it I saw myself, aged, pale, exhausted. But the worst part was my expression. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was empty, hollowed out. I touched the glass, and the reflection didn't mimic me. It stared through me, like it was remembering something I hadn't lived yet. Then it smiled, and the floor gave out again. I didn't even try to fight it. I just let go, because some part of me had already accepted that this was what I was now, a falling thing, a forgotten thread in a story that kept rewriting itself every time I woke up inside a dream. And as I dropped, I whispered to myself something I hadn't said until now. I don't know how to get out. And somewhere deep in the next layer, something finally answered. The fall didn't stop this time. It shifted. Not downward anymore, not through space or structure, but through memory. I felt myself drop through versions of myself, like flipping pages too fast to read. I saw flashes, me as a child looking up at a staircase. I was too afraid to climb. Me at a desk, tearing out pages I couldn't bear to read. Me asleep in a chair, surrounded by voices I didn't recognize, but somehow missed. Each moment blurred into the next until the memories weren't mine anymore. I fell through strangers, through their fears, their rooms, their dreams. I became a lens, not a person, a passenger inside the fall. Then something changed. The air thickened, became warm and electric, like the pause right before lightning strikes. And through that static, I heard a voice. Not above, not below, but everywhere. It didn't sound human, not in pitch or rhythm. It sounded like a language remembering how to speak. "You asked how to get out," it said. I tried to answer, but my mouth didn't exist here. Only my thoughts remained, scattered and flickering like dying stars. The voice continued. "There is no out, only down. The truth is always deeper." I tried to think back to the first fall, the first time I dropped into the dark, but even that memory had become slippery, like it had rewritten itself every time I landed. Maybe I never stopped falling. Maybe I was always mid-descent, and the rooms, the faces, the mirrors, they were just folds in the same endless curtain. "You are not dreaming," the voice said next. "You are what is dreamed." That froze something in me, not fear, recognition. I had never been the dreamer. I had been a page in someone else's sleep, a breath taken during someone else's nightmare. "Whose dream is this?" I asked, or thought I asked. The voice paused, then said something I will never forget. "This is the moment before waking, stretched thin, amplified. You are the echo of a mind trying not to open its eyes." That's when I saw it. Not light, not ground, but a figure, far below, falling toward me. Or was I falling toward them? The distance closed quickly. Their shape was familiar, terribly so. When we finally collided, there was no impact, only convergence. I was staring at myself again. This version looked calm, hands folded behind his back, falling with purpose. "You came further this time," he said. His voice was steady, like he had waited ages to speak. "I don't know where I am," I said. "Yes, you do," he replied. "But you keep asking because you don't want to say it." I hesitated, then said it anyway. "I'm inside myself." He smiled sadly. "Number. You're inside the part of yourself that you buried." I looked past him. The fall had slowed again. Around us stretched the architecture of nothing. Fragments of hallways, door frames that led nowhere, floating rooms like memories cut loose from time. It was beautiful in a way, like ruins built from things I didn't want to remember. "If there's no way out," I asked, "then what do I do?" "You listen," he said, "because the voice you heard, it wasn't someone else. It was me. It was always you, but only now are you far enough down to hear it." We fell together for a while in silence. The void softened. The tension in the air lessened, and then I felt it. The cold. Not dream cold. Real cold. A sudden chill like ice under skin. The first physical sensation I'd had in hours, or days, or eternities. He looked at me again. "This is it," he said. "The last fall." And then he let go of whatever held him here. He blurred, unraveled, vanished, and I fell one last time. The cold sharpened. I felt breath return, weight returned, sound returned, and my eyes opened. I woke up before I hit the ground, or maybe I hit it, and the pain was so deep it jolted me awake. Either way, when my eyes opened, I was in my bed, my real bed, back in my apartment. The room was dark, too dark, not the soft black of night, but the suffocating shadow of something that didn't want to be seen. The ceiling loomed too high, the walls too far, the silence was too loud. I sat up slowly, heart pounding in a rhythm I didn't recognize. The sheets tangled around my legs like restraints. My skin was cold and wet. though I hadn't been sweating. It felt more like I'd been pulled from water. I looked around, trying to ground myself. My desk was where it should be. The chair, the poster on the wall. Everything exactly as I remembered it. But I didn't feel like I was back. Not completely. Like some thread was still connected to the place I'd just fallen from, and if I moved too fast, it might snap and pull me back in. Then I noticed the mirror. It was leaning against the wall where I never put it. I didn't own a mirror like that, tall, narrow, with a brass frame that looked worn and old. And in the mirror, I didn't see myself. I saw the version of me I had met in the fall, calm, still, watching. He didn't move. He didn't need to, because I knew he was still there, just beyond the veil of waking. Not dead, not gone, just waiting, waiting for me to fall again. And I knew I would. Not tonight, but someday, because now that I had fallen that deep, I'd never truly stop falling. I just learned to land a little better. I got out of bed, feet cold on the floor, and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection appeared at last. Me, truly me. Same tired eyes, same uneven stubble. But in the pupils, deep down, a flicker of motion, like something swimming just beneath the surface. I raised my hand and touched the glass. It was warm. The mirror didn't ripple. It didn't pull me in. It just stared back, silent and still. But I heard the echo, the same voice I had fallen through, whispering gently from the depths of memory. You never woke up. You only hit the surface. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I was still there, still awake, still falling, just slower now. More careful, because some dreams don't end when you open your eyes. Some dreams remember you and wait for you to come back.